Can you see me yet? Woo! There we are. There I am. Okay. Hi, everybody. How are you? I'm so happy to be here with you guys today. We have a lot to talk about today. We're here. You sent me more questions than ever, which I appreciate. And a lot of them, I think, are questions that, as I answer it for you, I'm sure I'm going to be touching on something that's going to be relevant for somebody else. So I want to say thank you for all the really amazing questions that you sent in. It's really good to see you guys today. What a day. I will tell you, Black Friday starts for Soul Shift at 4 p.m. We are doing a 24-hour Soul Shift only Black Friday situation. So what I'm going to tell you is we're going to be done here at 3 o'clock, and then I'm going to go live into Soul Shift with your exclusive Black Friday code and your exclusive GWPs. So I can't tell you too much about it now, but at 3 o'clock I'm going to go live into the Soul Shift group. That way you have an hour to sort of prepare and get your ducks in a row. And then that will be only for 24 hours. And then Black Friday for everybody starts tomorrow at 4 p.m. We have worked, Team SG has worked for a year, just for today. So we are all like behind the scenes. It's like literally, it's like Santa's little workshop. I know. So that's why once a year Soul Shift gets a big, sexy pre show. And the products we're launching today, are just really designed and created and brought in with you in mind. So get excited. And you're welcome. Okay, so more on that. So like I said, at 3 o'clock, we're going to be done here. Then I'm going to grab my phone, go into the Soul Shift group, answer any questions you have about that, and then you will be off on your way. That's 4 p.m. Pacific time, 2 hours from now. And my team needs every minute of those 2 hours to finish getting ready for what is going to be a party tonight. Okay, now switching gears to the reason for our gathering today is for integration. And if is anybody new today? Is this your first integration? If you haven't been with me for an integration, I do want to say happy new moon, by the way, too. It's my moon. I spent an hour in meditation this morning, an hour that I really didn't even have because I have to. You know, when the new moon is in your sign, that's the universe going. So I hope if you have a moon in Sag too, that you're able to get some good meditation time in this morning. Yay! Carla didn't even know we were going to be here. That's fantastic. Well, maybe everybody who's here is experienced. And so if you are new joining later, this is integration. And so primarily we've been using it this year for questions about the journey, but it's also kind of a coaching opportunity. And I will tell you, next year, what I'm calling this is coaching. Because it really is. Like what I say to you in these sessions and how I respond to you, I would say 75% of the time I have my executive coach hat on. And I would say about 25% of the time, I say things to you that I would say to anybody as a coach. And so I kind of pull on that experience too to share perspectives with you. It's Heidi Cruz's birthday, and I'm so glad you're here. Happy birthday to you, Heidi Cruz. What a blessing to have today is your birthday, because this is the Archer new moon, right? This is you pulling your bow back and aiming your arrow exactly where you want it to go. So it's like the ultimate birthday wish for you. Make sure you really focus today, Heidi Cruz, on what you want to experience in the year ahead. It's going to be very important for you. Let us begin. Yeah, well, I am a doctor. I don't know if that would help it get past your insurance, but I do have a PhD. Okay, you ready? I'm glad you guys enjoy this. So I'm going to dive right in. The first question came in from Ashley Hart. She said, I'm 25 years old. This actually I thought was a really good first question, an interesting first question. She said, saying yes to Soul Shift last year changed my life. I'm so grateful for this experience. I feel like I've grown so much in a small amount of time, but I'm not feeling called to Soul Shift Pillars of Priestessing next year. Part of me has FOMO, but my intuition is saying I still need to integrate and go back and relearn some lessons from 2019. Do you have any advice, thoughts, words of inspiration for those who are not continuing? And so one of the... my immediate reaction was, I haven't really talked about the programs yet. In terms of I've said Pillars of Priestessing is included, and there's more of a crystal healing component, but that's like the tip of the iceberg and the rest is underneath. And I'm going to be revealing more about it in the next 2 weeks. what I would say is, if you haven't decided about Soul Shift or, programs for next year, I wouldn't make any hard and fast decisions until you know what you're dealing with. Then I think once I show you what the programs are, then if you don't feel like it's for you, then you'll have real clarity. You know what I mean? For me, it's hard to make a decision when I just don't know what I'm deciding about. And so I think at the high level, we've talked about it. But underneath that, what I would say is, I can tell you I haven't shared 95% of next year's programs because it's really kind of elaborate and complex, and there's a lot of interesting features to it and things that are new that I've never done before. You know what I mean? So anyway, and then once I show you everything in mid-December, if you're like, no, it's definitely not for me, then you'll have really good clarity and you won't have to kind of waffle on it. Do you know what I mean? If you feel like you're waffling, yeah, if it's a financial issue, that's a different issue, right? The good news is I think we're going to have PayPal credit up and running by the time class registration time comes. And so you'll have the quad pay option, and then you'll also have the PayPal credit option to break up your payment without making it into a credit card thing. Do you know what I mean? So that's kind of a cool thing. But if it's like you're not sure if the class content itself is right for you, what I would say is wait until you have the class content. And I really haven't talked about it yet, just because I'm still laying everything out, and like my team and I just made some decisions yesterday about the curriculum for the crystal course. You know what I mean? So like we're literally still moving chess pieces around. And so if you can hold out, if you're not sure, if you can kind of maybe wait, because then I think you'll be able to know absolutely clearly. Like I think you'll look at everything and go yes or no. And the yes is usually accurate. Like when you have all your facts in order, the yes is usually accurate and the no is usually accurate too. You know what I mean? So, and I'm one of those people, I will tell you, I never want anyone in programs who doesn't want to be there. Like, and some people in the past have said to me, like when they've been leaving and I haven't been like, oh, please come back. Some people have said to me like, oh, I thought you were going to, maybe ask me to stay. I have kind of a commitment to not asking people to stay. I actually heard about someone who teaches metaphysical classes online. I heard about this from one of you. And she had enrolled in that person's programs. And then she had decided it wasn't for her. And that person made it really difficult for her to get out. And for me, like that's just kind of not who I am. You know what I mean? If it's not kind of a full yes, I think that it's probably not right for you. And it may not be, right? So yeah, so it's a financial issue. We're going to have different options for you to break it up. You know what I mean? And at least for sure that the prices aren't increasing, which was, something that we had to come to agreement on as a team because our costs have expanded, right? Every year they go up. So we guaranteed no price increase. So then if it's about the content, you got to feel into it once you have it and see. Does that make sense? Yeah, I hope it might sound odd for me to say what I'm saying, but it's just like, I really think when it comes to your spiritual growth and development, you have to trust your own intuition above everything else. Mine has never led me astray. You know what I mean? But I'll never judge you if it's not for you, because that means that it's something else's, you know what I mean? It's not, yeah. So anyway, that's what I wanted to say in response to you, Ashley. And thank you for the question, because it maybe other people had the same question in mind. And it gave me a chance, too, to say, hey, I've shown you an unbaked cake. So if you're like, oh, that's not the icing I like, let me finish baking the cake before. And then if you say, well, I definitely don't want that cake, then at least you'll know, like, what the cake's made of. So more to come. And then Nicole Chevy Burns had a sort of a similar question. She said, can we talk about want versus need? My guides are leading me in a certain direction. Kind of the same thing. But she said she's in conflict over whether to stay or go. It's funny as a teacher to be responding to this, but like I said, my perspective is you got to kind of trust your intuition. But I did think, so I reflected on this myself though with classes that I take, because she said, can we talk about want versus need? She wants to continue the classes. And what I would say in response to this is, I've never thought about my spiritual classes as a want versus a need. But that's just me. Do you know what I mean? I've thought about things as a want versus a need, but not my learning. When I'm called to work with a teacher, I just know I have to work with that teacher. you know? But when I'm called to a thing, sometimes I'm like, do I want this or do I need it? But when a certain path is leading me, that usually is either like a full yes or a full no. So it's interesting because I haven't had the experience, Nicole, that you're having, like the ambivalence. When it comes to learning, I'm usually like, that's where I need to be and I need to work with that person. I mean, I have 2 teachers where I'm always like, I told one the other day, I'm like, you're going to be like having to wheel me around in your, retirement facility because I'm never going to leave your side, right? So it's like, sometimes I connect with someone and I just know that that's the journey, but I've never stopped and thought, do I really need to take that class? I think if you really are asking whether you need to, the answer may be no, right? Or want to. Like if you're really struggling with that question, maybe that's a sign. I'm not sure though. Yeah, it's like, that's what I do too, Rachel. And I'm not judging. Like I'm just sharing my own path and my own experience. Sometimes with things I can feel like it's a want. But with my spiritual learning, if I sense I want to work with someone or learn something, it's just like for me. Is that helpful? That's you. That's you with me, Sherry. No, it's just true. And not everybody feels that way about everybody. But like the people I feel that way about, I'm like, I feel sorry for you. You're stuck with me forever and ever until the end of time. Like you kind of just, this is what we're doing. I'm not going to be teaching forever and ever till the end of time. So I would say you don't have to worry about being stuck with me for that long. At some point, I'm going to go live in a temple somewhere for 6 months. That's right, Sherry. We can have like a little 2-seater maybe together. We can wheel around. You can come to the temple with me. Oh yeah. No, I don't have plans to teach forever. At some point, if I do teach forever, it'll be kind of in-person stuff. I betcha. You know what I mean? After a certain X period of time, I probably will teach, but probably more like in person. You know what I mean? Maybe, I don't know how long down the road that is, but I know I'm teaching next year, so we go year by year. Okay. Shadow work from Jenna Parker. She asked, again, every single question, you guys, just amazing question. I'm trying to get to as many as I can in the next, probably another 50, 55 minutes. And then, there's an audio. I don't know if I'll be recording it tonight. I might do it tonight just because I'm going to be cooking after tonight for the rest of the week. Might do it tonight just to kind of round this up and get it out to you tomorrow so that you have the rest of the answers. So if you asked a question, you're going to get an answer. Just maybe either right now live or it may be in the audio that comes later. Love you guys. Okay, Jenna Parker asked, how do you navigate through the uncomfortable feeling of transitioning between unhealed wounds to seen and healing wounds? How do we fill those empty spaces that the wound was removed from with love? Did you get that question? Because it's a really good question. How do you fill? So you've moved energy around. How do you go back now and kind of fill that in with white light, with clarity, with whatever it is, right? I don't feel loving like I usually do. I feel relieved and a bit lost and mad as hell. I think it's because I realize my narrative doesn't fit anymore. I don't know how to live in a skin that has always been lovable. I've never been here before emotionally. I love you, Alexis. Alexis is one of the very few people I can say this about. Like, I need her in my sphere forever. So as long as I'm around doing anything, Alexis, my intention is that you will be too. Okay. I thought this was a really powerful question. Everybody loves Alexis. I thought this was a really powerful question because a lot of us feel like we haven't been here before. We get to this place. So let me back up the truck and kind of like share my broader thoughts with you. When you do major spiritual work like we've been doing this year, where you're really moving the chess pieces around in your life, you know what I mean? And you're excavating old wounds and you're really doing the archaeology. You are moving old things that haven't been moved ever, or at least not in a long time. And so you stir up dust, you stir up, you know what I mean? You stir up all kinds of gunk and muck, don't you think? And then you have to go through this process of kind of like cleaning. Like, okay, so now this is where the furniture is. And it turns out that chair broke and this other piece of furniture, isn't really furniture or whatever. And so now I know what I'm left with, right? And so there's a period of tidying and sort of reorganizing and recalibrating so that you really know what you're working with, right? And I think that's what some of you are doing now. Like, you're kind of looking around the room and going, after your archaeological dig is complete, this is what you have. You know what I mean? You've pressure tested those relationships. They've either, risen to the occasion or not, right? For the most part this year, right? Everything that you kind of pushed into, you kind of know where it landed. And so now you got to work with what is. And I will, for me personally, which is probably the best way to share this with you, is from the lens of my own experience. The thing I struggle with most after shadow work is disappointment. I wanted something to be other than it was. I wanted myself to be other than I am. I wanted to believe something that it turns out isn't really accurate. And even, right, the now what, Lorian? That's exactly correct. When it's like, now I need a new chair. And so once I get through my disappointment, for me personally, Athena, disappointment is my least favorite emotion. I always say this. I try to have really low expectations of pretty much everything in my life because I don't like to be disappointed. I can't stand it. So if I expect less from everyone and everything in my life that I'm probably going to get, in terms of like in relationship, you know what I mean? Then I probably, like, if I expect somebody to call me every day and then they don't, I'm like, do they care about me? Versus if I'm like, well, I would love it if they called me once a month and they call me twice that month, and it's like, look at me, right? Because I try to keep a positive kind of lens on my life. And so I think you can set an intention for things to be one way, but then I think you have to mitigate your expectations, because sometimes your expectations in terms of timing don't align with your intentions and the outcome. Do you know what I mean? You can expect more that is going to be ready right away and then get disappointed. So you also have to toggle, like, not everything manifests for everybody at the same rate, in the same time, and in the same way, right? It's expectations. Almost every time I'm upset in my life, it's because I expected something that didn't happen or whatever. And that's on me. You know what I mean? Like, even if I'm upset with somebody else, maybe I expected behavior or an outcome or like something from them that wasn't appropriate for me to expect. I always ask myself that first, right? And so what I wrote in my notes for you, Jenna Parker, is have compassion for yourself first. I always like the snake skin shedding analogy because I think it's really apt, which is when a snake sheds its skin, it's like tender. You know what I mean? It's like that skin's never seen the light of day. It needs a minute to kind of cure and harden and get strong. You know what I mean? And Lena, yes. And I have that quote written down here at the bottom of my page. It actually says, no energy before it's time. No, Candace, it's not possible to have no expectations in relationships, but I try to have minimal expectations in relationships. Is that crazy? I seek to have minimal expectations in relationships because what I've learned is really most of what I need has to come from me at the end of the day anyway. And it's made my marriage better. It's made my relationship with friends better. Just because if you go around expecting the maximum capacity from people, I think that sets us up for failure. So so people in my life know kind of universally, like most of what they give is kind of icing on my cake. And a lot of times that turns into people wanting to give more because I just don't have an expectation of it, right? It's kind of freeing. It's kind of liberating. You might try it. I do have friends, though, like in their marriage, they have radical expectations. I mean, just radical expectations of their partners. And sometimes I look at those relationships candidly and I think I'm kind of glad I'm not in it. Like, I don't want to be everybody's everything. I don't even want to be one person's everything. Like, at least bring 50% to the table. You know what I mean? Like, if you expect anybody to bring 75% to the table in a relationship, that means you're looking to shirk some responsibilities, in my opinion. That doesn't work, And then if they do give you 60%, acknowledge it and say, you know what, I really appreciate that. Like, you did not have to do that. That is so flippin' cool versus like, So be gentle and compassionate with your tender skin, Jenna, because you're walking in new territory, and we're having to figure out how to create, my point is to create new expectations for a new paradigm. And so my questions to you, Jenna Parker, is Jenna here? I didn't see Jenna in the feed, I don't think. Anyway, later you'll see a Jenna. My main thing to you is you now know the landscape. Now you got to figure out the dynamics, and you're going to have to reorient to your relationships probably, and then ask yourself, what do I need, want, and expect from this relationship, right? Like it depends on who it is. What are reasonable expectations in this new paradigm that you're shifting into? It's really true. It's really, really true. No, I don't tell people, Heidi. This isn't like a dialogue where I'm like, "Hey, nice to meet you." I'm not gonna, or like, "Hey, Linda, I'm just checking to see how you're doing. I wanted to update you. I don't have any expectations of you now." Like, not that you thought it would be that. I'm exaggerating, but I don't really tell people that. I just live it. Like, this is how I inhabit relationships. Is just trying to ask myself in every moment, am I expecting too much? And I have expected too much. I mean, candidly, 3,000%, I have expected too much. And it has come back to bite me. Till I ratcheted that shit down. You know what I mean? And asked myself, is this realistic? Aww. Isn't that cool? I know. So it's like, it's new skin, but this is cool skin. And this new skin that you're moving into probably is more functional in relationships, right? Like, since I have tried to get cleaner in my relationships, I'm not perfect, and they're not all perfectly spick and span clean, but they're certainly 200% better than they were 2 years ago. Since I've really pushed down on the pedal of trying to clean shit up, I don't let stuff sit. I now will call it, and other people are free to call it with me too. And I just know where I stand, and other people know where they stand too, and it just feels better. But that can sometimes feel like not being loving like you used to be. Make sure that when you think to yourself, I used to be more loving, make sure what you're not saying is I used to be more codependent. This feels like a really important point to make. For some of us, myself included, I feel like I used to be more loving, but I'm pretty sure I was just codependent. And so my behavior allowed other people to get into unclean relationships with me at certain points and places that I can see, and they liked it and I did too. And so we allowed that to perpetuate until it couldn't work anymore. And we had to say, that's not functional. Do you know what I mean? I hope that's helpful. But a lot of people mistake empathy for codependency, and they mistake kindness and lovingness for codependency. So if it depends. If you being loving is you doing somebody else's work for them, then no, that store went out of business. that store called Let Me Do Your Shit For You, the whole chain went out of business. It wasn't just one of those stores, right? Like the whole chain went out of business. Well, the definition I'm using of, codependence means a lot of things to a lot of people, right? But it's the idea of you're mutually responsible for the for the negative outcomes in your life, right? So it's like somebody else wants you to do their work for you, and you become willing to do that work for them. So it looks like being an empath, or like being a helper, or being nice, or being a good friend, when in reality it's like, actually no, you should be doing that work. That is not my work to do, right? What's mine is mine, and I need to look at it and own it and do it and show up to it, but what's yours is yours. Right? Well, and Hannah said codependent until 39. I still have moments in my life when I veer to the edge of codependency, because we're human. But at least I'm aware, like, oh, I'm trying to get him to do my shit for me. And I have a husband who will look at me and go, are you seriously trying to get me to do that for you? So if you create a culture in your life that doesn't support codependency, then you're going to surround yourself with relationships that mirror that back to you and go, that doesn't feel right. That's not who you are, right? Kind of thing. Yeah, I would say that's beautiful, Candace Mills, by the way. So let's define it that way. Let's define maybe codependency equals empathy with no boundaries. not only do I feel your pain, but now I'm going to take it on as my own. And now I'm going to live your pain because I feel like in some way that's helping you. And now I'm going to, it's like I can hold space for you experiencing what you're experiencing, but I can't make it my own, right? Yeah, Dave is awesome. But we really do have that kind of relationship where he'll be like, nope. Isn't that interesting, Heidi? Happy birthday wisdom to you. I love it. So anyway, Jenna Parker, thank you. Jamie Taylor, please talk about shadow work and addiction and recovery. I know a lot of people need to hear this, including me. I'm in recovery, and shadow work has never been harder. The depression, the anxiety, the restlessness, the insomnia. Then how can it be practiced to help someone stay sober? This question means a lot to me. Yeah, and I think it's a powerful question. I should, preface by saying that the addiction and recovery experience isn't one that I've had. So when I'm talking to you about it, I'm really talking to you about what others in my community have shared. If any of you in the feed also, I always want to reinforce, like, everybody in the group here has wisdom. So if you're in recovery and you're open about it, if there's a practice that's really helped you, that would be awesome for you to share. One of the I'm checking what I wrote in my notes too. Oh yeah, that's right. Okay, so one of the most common, first of all, I think that shadow work is critical to the healing of the issues that led to the need for recovery, right? And a lot of times that period of substance abuse and addiction is really a period of you trying to do shadow work without doing it. You know what I mean? It's like a lot of times when people end up addicted to alcohol or drugs, it's usually because it's almost like their soul is wanting to do the work that the body or the mind or the heart isn't caught up to yet. And so that's why, and there's plenty of it in my own family, right? There has been in the past, different like small issues of it and larger issues of it, not in my nuclear family, but in my extended family. So I've kind of witnessed this. And so one of the things I want to say is, have compassion for people who are in that space because they're wanting to do the work. Like, there's some part of them that recognizes, and have compassion for yourself if you're in that space, because some part of you for that entire time knew this was necessary, right? And so now you're doing it, and this is a critical component to really understanding the nature of your wound, which may have been sort of numbing it a little bit. Now it's not numb, and that hurts, right? That's really, really a struggle. I know, Roxanne, right? So one of the techniques and modalities that has really helped a lot of my clients who've been through these experiences is pranayama breath work. And what's really cool now, and I have friends I can connect you to plug you into a broader network. Jesse Groves, who did breath work for my sabbatical retreat 2 years ago. It's fantastic. He's well resourced. He's kind of plugged into this breathwork network, and it extends across the entire United States and even outside into Europe. And I've heard about breathwork teachers in New Zealand and Australia. So I don't think there's anywhere you are, or probably within an hour or two of where you are, that you couldn't find pranayama. Don't you think, Sherry? And those of you who do the breath work. And so, and it has a very powerful effect that I would tell you dozens of my clients have said has really helped them. And it's usually affordable. It's a beautiful experience. It's transformational, but without any substances, and it actually will help you get through. And then learning how to work with your breath may sound silly if you don't right now, but your breath is a critical tool. It absolutely is. It's when you don't have any crystals with you and any oils with you and anything else with you, you got your breath. And if you learn how to work with your breath and ally with your breath as a tool, it can absolutely transform. I mean, you can breathe through pain, you can breathe through nausea, you can breathe through any experience. So that's one of the things I wanted to share with you as a technique. I think, what was the other thing I mentioned too? Oh, mantra work is really important and has been helpful for friends and family and clients who have been through recovery. We could absolutely do another session in class. I mean, here's the thing, it's not difficult to learn how to do, but there's something about doing it in a group. Like, once you know the technique, you can do it. There are people who will say, no, you got to always do it in session. You don't have to always do it in session. But it is so nice to have a teacher leading you through. It's just like, for me, it's like any other kind of meditation. I love being taught. I love being led. And I do like to be in community, surrounded by other people who are doing their healing work too. So it's not just the exercise, it's the experience of it. Well, why don't we do that for next year? I mean, if you guys need the work now, I would say let's plug into a network and get you a good practitioner in your area, and use the Facebook group as a way to say, hey, anybody know Juan here or anything like that? Like, let's share resources that way, and then we can weave it into the curriculum next year. That's interesting. Well, a lot of people fear losing control, and there's a certain point in the breathwork journey where it is kind of hard to move your hands and your feet. They call it lobster claw, but the energy is flowing so powerfully from your breath that it kind of feels like you can't move. And some people like fear that so much that they don't go and do it, but the reality is that's the pleasure part. Like, once you're in it, you'll realize that was nothing to be afraid of. But if you've clawed out, yeah, it's a really, really good one. Yeah, so let's find out, Nathan. Nathan, where you are, dude, 3,000%, man. I bet you there's breath work like within a square block of where you are. So it just depends. I mean, I guess I can't guarantee, but I would bet you there's somebody really, really close to you. And then I will lead you through it virtually next year too, so that you can have the experience. Super fun. I'm glad that came up. Okay. And of course, there's always more to say, but I try to give kind of brief and helpful answers during these sessions. But I want to thank you, Jamie, for the question. Deborah DePetris asked, can you talk more about the shadow of fear and anger? Remember that anger is fear, right? Like, anger is fear. That's the most important thing to know. People who are really, really mad are actually just really, really scared. It's the Hermetic principles, right? It's understanding that everything's on these divine continuums. And so when you're really, really angry, like, that's the other side of being really, really afraid, and just not being able to find your way to the clarity that those are two sides of one coin, right? I'm pretty sure Julia Mick is in Denver, or if she's not in Denver, she's in Boulder. She was the first person I ever did breath work with. And she's younger than me. She's a flippin' powerhouse. If you're ever in Colorado, sorry to divert back to that, but your question, Candace, kind of jarred me a little bit. Look up Julia Mick and the Breath of Love. She tends to be more expensive than other people, so you have to kind of look at her pricing and stuff, but whoa, she's good. So anyway, that's the thing to remember about anger. Anger isn't really anger. Anger is, underneath all of anger is fear. And if you can get the person who's really angry to understand what that fear is, usually there's a big release. You know what I mean? Like, and then the tears, right? Because it's like finally acknowledging when you've been like, no, I'm just angry, right? And it's like when you finally acknowledge, okay, I'm really afraid of this, or I worry about this, or I'm assuming this, and that's what's making me angry, or angry at this person, or whatever, right? Okay. Let's see. So remember that. The Hillary Russell asked, kind of feeling the effects of less sunlight that comes in the winter, and I want to hear from you guys because I live in LA, so it's like easy for me to say these different techniques to help with seasonal affect disorder. But she said it feels like shadow when it doesn't need to be. What's the best way to combat that when you're sensitive to it, besides getting a sun lamp? And so what I wanted to say, again, from things that I've heard from people who live in areas where you really do get the full 4 seasons, and or at least, you have a substantial time that you go without sunlight, is finding other ways to bring in illumination. Learning to make light in the darkness or in the wintertime, exciting for you too. And so working more with candlelight, working with stones of illumination like selenite that brings sort of an internal light, labradorite, rainbow moonstone. It gets really, like Michelle Nacello's in Canada, right? So she can speak to that. And a lot of my clients who are Canadian have talked about this too. Yeah, making sure you up your vitamin D. That's a great suggestion too from Candace Mills. What else do you guys do? Those of you who are in really seasonal climates, how do you navigate it? I've really given this thought because we almost moved to New Jersey. Before we moved to San Diego, I had a job offer at a university in New Jersey, and my husband's from upstate New York. And he was just like, I don't know if I can do the winters again, right? Like, he's from New York, and he wasn't sure he could tolerate it, right? Yeah, and it starts getting around the East Coast. You guys are dark by 5. We're dark by 6 here right now in LA. These are helpful, really helpful suggestions in the feed. Taking prescription vitamin C and vitamin D, fresh air, getting outside for at least 15 minutes, happy lights, vitamin D again. Any sunshine that you can find. Sun lamps is what Roxanne is offering. Get outside and breathe. That's right. Make socialization a priority, because I can imagine that feeling isolated would sort of like would exacerbate it, right? Like, I'm just sort of, yeah, right? What about you, Nathan? What do you do? I know, because you're where you are too, right? Karen says to get outside. Lots of vitamin D. I need to up my vitamin D even where we live. Let's see. Yeah, Candace says it's 4:30. It's dark in Pennsylvania, and where you are, Candace. Interesting. Okay, well, these are helpful suggestions, so thank you so much for the question, too, because, again, if you're wondering it, somebody else is probably wondering it, too. MJ had a great question for the shadow archetype grid. Can we pull cards daily, or is this a one-time for the shadow season? You can do it anytime. I love working with the major arcana for the archetypes alone. It's a really great way to do readings. Those of you who do readings for clients, I hope I've inspired you to do some major arcana readings as kind of a way to switch it up in your professional work that you do, because a lot of you are readers. And then the shadow spread can be done the whole year long. You know, especially if you are feeling shadowy, or if you're working with a client, you know, that's having some issues come up, like, I'm really feeling angry and I'm so out of sorts and it's like not like me. If a client is coming to you with a shadowy question, I would say to pull out that shadow archetype grid and use it any time. I don't know what you think about that, but for me, Elena says her clients love it. So just like continue with it, I would say, and then use it in those situations and circumstances where somebody's asking you a question and you suspect there's shadow stuff going on underneath it and you're not sure. That was a great question. Michelle Coble, since this is our last of the shadow season this year, I guess I'm going to be blunt and ask away. I love these questions. I guess I'd prefer your insight, even though I do need to work through it. So I'm just going to use one example in my life that happened. And she shared that 6 or 7 years ago, I wasn't the cheater, but I was the one he had cheated with. We've moved past this. He's with the same girl and has a kid, but we're all still friends. But I never came clean, and I know if I did, I would create a sticky situation between them. This is such a good question. I hope you guys are following it. Does shadow mean bringing up all the dirty deeds we've done and confessing them, even if it means hurting people, or just becoming peaceful in our hearts and realizing we are human and we all make mistakes? And she's shared that in the card spread, her shadow was the Tower, her self was Strength, which is also her life path number. She's an 8. Okay. Great question, don't you think? Here's my take, and it probably won't surprise you if you've been with me for a while. I don't think the relationship part is hers to deal with. I think that's his to deal with. Remember we talked about this, how like not doing other people's work for them. I mean, I understand she's still friends with them, but what I would say is her work to do here is to look at what's coming up within herself right now. That getting the Tower card as a shadow card for me means really fearing destruction, like fearing that you could open up a can of worms that no one could close. But from my perspective, you know, what you need to get clear and clean about within yourself is that you participated, right? I mean, if that's what you're struggling with, like that you played that role in that relationship. I think if you get clean and clear about that and you release and you start to have a little bit of compassion for yourself about what was going on there during that time, what I wrote is, this is within you to resolve, and he has to deal with the relationship. Right? My 2 cents. Yeah, Teresa said, do no harm. I mean, that is the read, right? That is the rule. Accidental Life said, the thing that has helped me the most is noting all the natural changes in each season. Oh, she's going back to the light issue. Yep, make direct amends to such people wherever possible, except when to do so would injure them or others. From the 12-step program. Thank you for that, Kimberly. And I'll put it a different way. If you resolve this within yourself, or let's play out the other scenario. If you go and just bust up their relationship and everything, crumbles, are you really better off in that? Are you going to feel more complete in that second scenario than you would in the first? That's the question you have to sit with. It's a fantastic question and thank you seriously for being brave enough, Michelle. Yes. And so for me, it would be enough to resolve it within myself. If I was the one still in that relationship, though, I would have to get that out in the open. That would be an unclean relationship for me if I was him. Right? Interesting. Kimberly Hadding asked, how can you tell what is your shadow, especially from a past life, with acceptable anger at a social injustice? How do we know when we are avoiding our own work versus standing up for what is right? I find myself questioning my feelings. It's funny because when I read when I read your question, what I thought to myself is, you need to ask yourself that question. Like being upset is not shadow. Does that make sense? Like if I see something happen and it's wrong or it's inappropriate or it's disrespectful or whatever it is, and I get upset, I don't consider that my shadow. Being upset in and of itself. Now, if I go out and I start engaging in rageful behavior, or if I start projecting those things onto somebody else and start harming others with it, or then there may be something going on there. If I use what I'm upset about to create chaos, right? Then there might be a shadow issue there. But me just being upset about something, if I was to judge every single emotion I have and go, you look at that shadow or whatever, it's like, no, look what that person just did. Like, I'm upset about that. Does that make sense? So it depends on whether it crosses that threshold. Here's what I tell my kids, okay? I mean, for what it's worth. And I'm not treating you like children. I'm just saying some things I've tried to crystallize in an easy way when it's these tough concepts, but I'm trying to teach them before they have the context to fully understand, but so that they have enough information to help themselves. You know what I mean? So what I always tell my kids is, your emotions themselves do not upset me, but how you manifest those emotions. It's not that you have them, it's how you express them that can become a problem. But if I sit there and go, well, you shouldn't be angry and you shouldn't be sad and you shouldn't be frustrated, and it's like, no, we're human. We're going to be angry, sad, and frustrated probably once a day, every day, right? Does that make sense to you guys? So it's like, it's not that you have the emotions that you have a shadow. It's how you express them. And if you express them in a destructive way, then maybe you do have shadow stuff to look at, right? Yeah. Well, Stephanie Kolb, I don't know if you heard me. I've seen your question in the feed. If you didn't hear the beginning, you should go back. Well, I was talking about anger as fear. And anger about trauma is fear and sadness, right? So there's a little girl part there that has to be responded to. And so I would recommend going back to, it's completely normal. And I would go back and listen to the part about fear, because I think it would be important for you. That's right. It's not that you feel something. It's how you manifest the feeling that indicates shadow. That's a great question from Kimberly. Sudi asked, is there a specific location for a shadow altar, like southeast or northeast? And what I wrote in my response to her is the Bagua map, which is the feng shui map of placement of energies and flow of energies and spaces, doesn't have a category of shadow. Like here's where your shadow shit happens. So the way you would want to decide where to put a shadow altar is based on what your shadow is, right? Is your shadow around relationships? Southwest corner of your home or room. Is your shadow around money? Southeast corner of your room, and so on. So the Bagua map, which you can find by Googling, it's spelled Bagua, will help you orient where to put your altar in your room depending on what your particular shadow is. I hope that's helpful. That's right. Okay, and then she asked, healthy versus wounded energy. Someone had a post regarding that, and it made me wonder, how do we know when it's healthy or wounded? I would like to know a little bit more about your question there, Sudi, because I think I want to make sure I understand what you mean by healthy and what you mean by wounded. Because I might be interpreting it through my own lens of what that means. So if you can give me an example, then I'll come back and respond to that in a clearer way for you. Okay. Kathy Ann asked, is there a time when we should stop concentrating so much on shadow work and save it for next year? Like now. I cleaned up a lot of stuff this past fall and I feel great, but I still have one or two things that are rearing up. Is it better to just release and relax now or keep working on shadow stuff right up to Yule? My response to Kathy Ann, you might, I don't know what you'll think of it, but what I said is, whenever I don't know what to do, and maybe my teacher's not around, or maybe I don't want to share it with somebody else. So whenever I have a challenge, truly, and I don't know what to do, I look at nature. I consider nature to be my best teacher. And so my question back to you is nature holding on to stuff right now? Or is she starting to, right? I mean, around me, she's going like this. Around some of you, she's already let that shit go like a month ago. Around me, she's kind of holding on, but it's cold, so she's like, I gotta let it go. Cue siren. Siren drop. Give it a break for now is my 2 cents. Listen, shadow work is ongoing. Something comes up for me. I mean, in a way that it's perceptible to me, just sharing like candidly my own experience, I would say once a month or so, something kind of comes up where it's either about me or somebody else and it's a little shadowy. Once a month. I'm not talking like huge things, but little things where I call it scratchy. I got that from Claire, who works for me. She describes things like that as scratchy. Isn't that a great word? Like, ooh, that's scratchy. Like a person or a conversation or an energy. Do you know what I'm talking about? So like, I would say once a month, I'm aware enough of a scratchy thing. And so, yeah, that can be Christmas and your family acting like, jerks when you went to all this trouble for your meal and, they don't show up or they're not grateful or whatever. Like, you can't stop and go, well, I'm not going to deal with that right now because it's Christmas flippin' day, right? Like, you still got to stop and go because you you don't want to contract. This is the main thing I want you to think about from a shamanic perspective, okay? You're human. You're going to be human now. You're going to be human in December. You're going to be human in January, which are not shadow months, right? They're incubation months. They're restoration months of recuperating, and regaining your energy and your strength, pulling up from your roots, right? But that stuff is going to come up, and the only harm things do is when you push down. Anything can happen at any time, right? Where you, as long as you breathe through it and move through it. But what we tend to do is something happens and we contract on it. Like, oh, you know how you feel things in your gut, like somebody says something or they do. It's like, oh. That's a contraction. And that's how you know it's taken a little bit of a root. And if you don't acknowledge that, it takes a deeper root. And if you don't acknowledge it, it takes a deeper root. Do you know what I mean? Like, you have to keep breathing, keep moving the energy, keep doing the work all year long. But do you need to be doing full-on shadow work where you're really, no. I think you can sort of go about your, return to your regularly scheduled programming. That's right, Rita. Rita says, it's reason number 84,000 why you should give up the holidays. Anxiety is a contraction. Anything that makes you go, where you're not breathing, you're contracting. And that's why breath work is so important, because I will notice in my own body where I go, like today, my nanny called out sick. Like, today's not the right day for that to happen. So I'm missing childcare. It's stressful. I got pneumonia tonight and stuff. And I heard myself go, because I felt myself go, oh my God. I mean, it wasn't just sick. She had something else that she was doing. Anyway, long story short, I was just like, really? Because I, like, all of a sudden in my mind, all the chess pieces had to be moved around, and I'm so, like, there's very little time. And then I just was like, right? Like, it's, I literally will remind myself to breathe. Because otherwise you just contract. And even a little contraction's a contraction. Somebody cuts you off at a stoplight or something. Like, even a little contraction's a contraction, right? Nope. No, I mean, I was able to rearrange it really quick, but it's just like, you know, it's like one more thing. And in those one more thing moments, you're just like, okay. So thank you, Kathy Ann, for that question. Becky Yarbrough asked, when talking about knowing or healing your wound, is this tied to your natal chart, or do you just intuitively know what it is? And she was talking about absence and rejection by her biological father. And so the answer to your question, Becky, is Chiron in your chart, which we learned about earlier this year. If you're in Soul Shift, go back to your Chiron material from earlier in 2019 and review that. If you didn't happen to be in class at that time, I would look at your natal chart, figure out where your Chiron wound is, and start digging in to do a little work and research there. Because where your Chiron is your wound, right? He's the wounded healer in Greek mythology. And so, and he wasn't able to heal himself. So there's this like never-ending loop of like not being able to address the wound or not. And everybody has a Chiron return right around 50. I'm entering mine now. What a fun ride that is. Like, it seems really unfair for women to have to go through menopause and Chiron return at the same time. It's like a 1-2 kind of situation. So anyway, go and figure out where Chiron is in your chart and dig in there. And then but we do intuitively know what the wound is too. A lot of times when you think you know what your wound is and then you go into your natal chart, it reinforces it. You know what I mean? I mean, it's for a lot of us, when we find out about our Chiron, we're like, oh yeah, of course that's what it is, right? So do a little digging there. I think you're going to find some good information, and then, but your intuitive hit is usually correct. And the father wound's a tricky one for girls. I don't think it's any trickier than the mother wound. You know what I mean? Because the mother wound has the same level of impact. Rejection from either of your parents is one of the hardest things to navigate, you know, and if you've had that experience, it's almost like people who've been really loved and accepted by their parents. It's like a threshold they can't even cross unless it happened to them in a past life. They almost have no framework for understanding it. Like, I don't even bother trying to explain it to anybody, for me personally, anymore. I'm just like, no, if you had everything perfect, then it's just a little bit of our playing field that like can't be reconciled, right? That's right. If you even have both of your parents, it's true. So thank you for that question. Rose McConaughey asked, would you talk about the positive side of shadow more? Girl, yes. This is a great question. And she said, but here's one thing I want to mention to you, Rose McConaughey. She said, after OLAS, I became grateful for my shadow once I made the connection of how it protects us as well. And one distinction I like to draw, if it's helpful for you, I think our ego protects us, and I think our shadow is projected by us. So sometimes what you may be thinking of as shadow in that instance could actually be more ego than shadow, right? Which is a little bit complex, but I wanted to draw that distinction for you. The positive side, I know, Nathan, sometimes I'm like, I can't believe I'm looking up and seeing what time it is. Maybe it doesn't go by fast for you. Our classes for me are like watching the clock do that. I mean, I'm always having a good time, so maybe that's why. Like, I really enjoy it, but I'm just like, what is happening with that clock right now? I don't think I live in this dimension anyway. But anyway, back to the subject at hand. So the beauty of your shadow, at least for me, the collective shadow, is there's a lot of creativity in there. You know, what stirs your desires, what makes you angry, what makes you frustrated, what makes you like, that's your passion. For some people, that's the, right? But for some people, their shadow is the only, for some people, the only juice they've really got. You know what I mean? So can you really look at that anger that they feel and see it as a bad thing? Because it's like, at least they're passionate about something, right? And because anger and frustration and jealousy and rage and all of these emotions are multifaceted, they're not just one thing. We slap a label on it so we can store it in the closet of our shadow and keep it organized in alphabetical order. But the reality is rage is composed of subcomponents of other emotions, right? And among those emotions are very creative and generative feelings too, right? Like in that rage might also be desire, right? You're angry because you want it so bad and you can't figure out, like, there's desire built in there, right? For some people. And so what I like to do is like take the big shadow emotions and stretch them out a little bit, pull them apart, and see if you can't figure out what the subcomponents are. Ask yourself, if you're angry, if I asked you to make your anger into a pie and I told you you had to cut that pie in 6 slices, in fact, why don't you do it? Like, anger. Give me 8 other words to describe it. I would do this if I was coaching someone, right? I mean, and sit and write them down. And you can't use the word anger. That exercise may be just the shift you need. Truly. Because I'm going to take your word away from you and force you to come up with other words that are just as accurate to describe it. And I bet you at least one of those words isn't half bad. Why are you angry, right? Why are you rageful? Why are you jealous? I'm jealous because I really want beautiful things in my life and he seems to have all of them. Okay, so what's good about that? You understand beauty. You can identify beautiful things. That's part of your, right? That's a gift. Some people wouldn't even notice what other people have. They would be blind to it. So the fact that I'm just giving you examples, right? Like how do you turn this around? Make the pie, right? What's in your anger pie? What is it for you, right? I get resentful. Resentment is one of my big shadow emotions. But I could break my resentment pie down into a couple of really thick slices of other things going on. Do you know what I mean? Other things going on that are far more accurate than resentment, right? Is it really resentment? Because resentment is about other people. So what's really going on with me, right? My resentment pie tastes like shit. It's not good. And then bake it. That's right. So thank you for all of those amazing questions. Those were so good. Let's see if I can get to one more. Cindy asked me a question I'd want her to rephrase. She asked, could you go over how the major arcana tarot cards integrate into the archetype for our shadow spreads? So I wasn't clear what part of the archetypes in the thread or the spread you weren't clear about. So if you can rephrase that for me here or later, then I can come back and give you a clear answer. I just want to make sure I'm answering the question the way you intended it. Jill Lathers asked, curious about what the death card in the shadow position means. How does rebirth transformation apply to shadow? And so my response to you, Jill, is it can be the fear of death or the fear of change. Remember, your shadow, this is what I wrote down for you, Jill Leathers. Your shadow is what you have trouble acknowledging. Your shadow is what you have trouble acknowledging. So think about that and then look at what's coming up in that box on the spread and look at the card and ask yourself, how am I having trouble acknowledging death? How am I having trouble acknowledging death? It's the best, it'll give you the most accurate answer to your question. And then I do have a strong shadow, says Scarlett. I do have a strong, Scarlett B. I do have a strong shadow when I'm driving, and people are not kind when driving in Miami. That is very true. Something that simply gets me upset, wondering for some insight, and I don't get upset with big problems, go figure. So she only sweats the small traffic stuff. Again, you just getting mad isn't your shadow. I mean, that is... No, we're going to do that next, Angela. I'm signing off here and then going into Soul Shift, and we're going to deconsecrate our tools, and then Black Friday is starting for you guys at 4 o'clock today if you join late. So thank you, Angela, for asking. We're about to deconsecrate our tools probably in the next, 10 minutes or so. So stay tuned. I'm going live into Soul Shift right after we're done to do both of those things. Remember that your feelings are not your shadow. You can be mad at drivers all day long. What are you doing about it? Now, if you're going home and you're taking all that bottled up anger and then you're turning around and starting to yell at your family, that's a different story, right? So again, it's not that you have the feelings, it's how you express and how you work with those energies. So it's, people get mad about all kinds of things because we're human. And like I said, I mean, if you make it your goal not to feel your feelings, you're going to get in a lot of spiritual trouble. Because you start doing this again. And then that leads to, when you do this, the only way out of this, or to keep it all bottled up, is to shop it down, eat it down, drink it down, smoke it down. It takes one of these dysfunctional behaviors to keep stuffing stuff in your soul suitcase, So that's what I would say is you have to feel your feelings and find a way to express them productively so you don't repress them or project them. Repressing them hurts you. Projecting them hurts everybody else. So what's the third alternative? If you're not going to push it down and drink it down and shop it down and smoke it down and sex it down, and if you're not going to then project it out and scream at people and yell at people and hit people and do other things, right? What's the other option? To find a way, which is what I've been trying to teach you this year, to find a way to effectively and productively work with what's going on. Mantras, reminding yourself, breathing, solfeggio frequencies, dialogue here, right? Sharing your story, allowing yourself to be witnessed, understanding more about who you are and what makes you tick, so that you kind of can see where your blind spots are, and you can resolve them and address them so they don't, right? Wes comes, you transmute it. You find productive ways to transmute, all the things that I just said and more, right? You exercise, you breathe, you fuel, you use those energies as fuel to do something more beautiful with them. I always share the story, when we moved to San Francisco, I was really upset. I did not want to move to the Bay Area when we did, because I'm from where I live now, and my parents, I didn't want to be so far away from my parents, and I was in grief because we had to be up there at the time for Dave's job that he had taken in tech. And I had to really learn. I could have done a lot of different things with that grief. I had to learn how to acknowledge it and then channel it and make it productive. Because I had to learn through the Hermetic principles that grief is one end of a spectrum and the other end of the spectrum is joy. But it's which side of that teeter-totter am I going to live on? You have to really sometimes talk to yourself. Not all the time and not in public. You know what I mean? I don't want you guys getting in trouble. I just find that, talking to yourself in public really, it earns you some new friends sometimes, but it also really can make you the butt of some uncomfortable jokes. Use your tools, and you are your tool. You know what I mean? All right. I'm going to take 5, switch my table around to get my mesa back for deconsecration. I want to let Soul Shift know I'm going to be live in your group, your Facebook group, to share all the details of Black Friday. Black Friday starts for Soul Shifters, and all of the VIP gifts with purchase begin today at 4 p.m. Pacific time. There will be brand new products on sagegoddess.com. You have an exclusive code, and so I'm sharing that privately with you as I head over to your Soul Shift Facebook group in about 5 minutes from now. And I'm so excited to show you. We've been waiting, and working. It really is like the North Pole downstairs. I wish you could see. So anyway, lots of love to you guys. We'll see you in just a few minutes. Thanks for being here today. And the continuation of all these conversations and questions and answers will come your way as soon as I can get it done for you. We'll see you soon.